Greetings, and welcome to Skylanders Portalcasters, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything Skylanders. I am your host, GFDitto, and I am joined today by co-host Inklander. And in today's episode, we are going to be discussing creation crystals. How you doing today, Inklander?
Doing great, Ditto. How about you?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. So, creation crystals. What are your thoughts?
So this is going to be really fun because this is kind of going to be I guess, sort of part one of a slightly loose four-part episode where we're going to be going through and talking about all these different, I guess you could call them loosely magic items, so we're going to be talking about creation crystals and traps and everything over the next couple episodes. And honestly, out of all the gimmicks that we've gotten over the years, specifically of these like additional, not gimmick landers, but I guess additional almost magic item kind of types, I really like the creation crystals. I think it's a really cool idea, and considering that Toys for Bob knew at the time that Skylanders was going to be winding down from the yearly release schedule, they thought there might be a Skylanders 7, but they weren't quite sure. Honestly, the introducing this idea of, hey, you're able to create your own Skylander, and you're able to have them in this like little crystal thing that literally, once you've made the character, is its own Skylander in every way, where you're able to upgrade them and level them up. And it's a really cool idea, honestly. And it's kind of cool because they said that they took a lot of that inspiration from the idea of like, oh, they got so much fan mail over the years of kids asking them, hey, could you make a character like this or make a character like that. They actually were just like, sure, just here you go. Here's all the parts. Go ahead and make whatever you want. And I kind of really like that.
See, for me, initially when they announced the creation crystal was going to be a thing, my initial reaction was, this feels lazy. They just don't want to design the number of Skylanders that they used to design for us. And then my opinion kind of changed when they were actually released and it was put into practice, because the creation crystals are actually a really, really cool concept. I now understand that they weren't being lazy, they were actually trying to give the Portal Masters all the power there, and allow us to unleash our creativity and to design our own Skylanders. That way, it was kind of like having a contest to create your own Skylander, but better because everybody got included in it.
Yeah. And that's even something they did when the game was out. In the first couple months, they actually even held like creator contests on social media where people were able to submit their own designs, and the winners of that would be able to get their own 3D printed Imaginators that would have the NFC chips with them. And I kind of like that idea because now, like even years after the game's released, it's still really fun to see exactly what people are coming up with, and no one's going to be able to create the exact same thing unless they go try to copy that character one for one, because at the end of the day they have so many different customization options that there's probably trillions, maybe more, different combinations of things that you can choose from with this creator. It's so in depth that it's a lot of fun to just take the time to dive into that and really make sure that that character is exactly what you want.
Exactly. Once the creation crystals were actually released and I got to mess around with them, I really only had one major complaint about them, and that was the anti-consumer move of locking the battle class.
Right, yeah, and we've touched on that a little bit in the capitalism episode from last season, but I do agree. That was a really strange move, because then that's making you have to have 100 different creation crystals to be able to have all those different options, unless, you want to exploit the way that NFC works, and, use your copy of Giants or of Spyro's Adventure on the 3DS to be able to, overwrite that save data and basically wipe the crystal. But yeah, for the general consumer who isn't a collector of Skylanders, that basically is a permanent decision. Once you have whatever character it is locked to a battle class, then that's it. You can't change that. And that was definitely a pretty poor move, because what could end up happening is, if there's a bunch of siblings that are all playing Skylanders, they might accidentally end up creating like two Bowslingers or something like that. And that just is limiting their options to be able to play, and that's kind of just disappointing. But yeah, I would say that that's a pretty major just complaint there. But that is something that kind of happened sporadically with different things throughout the Skylanders franchise, as we talked about in the capitalism episode.
Now, I also really like the design of the creation crystals, but at the same time, my thought process has always been, why do we need the case that's around the crystal? Why isn't it just the crystal with an NFC chip in it? I feel like that would have been a really, really cool thing to do. They could have come up with a number of sculpts to go along with it, just focusing on the crystal itself. And then they would be easier to store, and I just think it would all around look better, because it's supposed to be the creation crystal, not creation crystal in a capsule.
Yeah, it's a little weird exactly what they ended up going along with for that kind of thought process.
Especially since when you load it into game, all it loads in is the crystal.
That's true. That's true. And so it does kind of make you wonder, why did they not just come up with, different crystal designs, which they did, but they also had the case change, and then depending on what element the case was with, it would have a completely different crystal. And it was just kind of an odd decision on their part to be able to kind of mix and match those things. And while, of course, there are only going to be, based on what was supposed to be released, while there's only supposed to be 3 different case/crystal molds per element, it still was a little bit of an odd choice. Really, all they kind of needed to do, especially because on the back of every creation crystal, they have a place to be able to put a sticker to be able to determine what battle class it is that you've chosen for that crystal. It's kind of odd that they even felt like they needed to have different molds in the first place. Maybe they could have had a different design for every element, but then after that, all you need to do to be able to be oh, I know I have my bowslinger in this crystal because there's the sticker on it, that's kind of all you need. You don't really need the sculpts to actually differentiate between what crystal it actually is. Because even when I do have designs in my creation crystals, I never think, oh, I have this character that's in this version of the light crystal. Usually it takes me shuffling through a couple of my light crystals to be able to figure out which one is actually in. I don't really usually try to pay attention to it that much. So, I think the sticker system that they kind of came up with is kind of good. And then especially at the end of the day, not having these sculpts would have been better for collectors anyway, because then if it was just the same exact design of a crystal, one for each element, then, if you're trying to get one of everything, then you just need one of each crystal for each element. You don't need to go try to collect all the different sculpts, which was something that was a pain trying to collect for traps, which will be talking about a couple episodes from now. So it was a little bit messy of an idea. I know that they wanted to try to bring it back from Trap Team, and some of the stuff they did come up with was really cool. There's an interview with Robert Leyland, who does all the kind of tech behind the scenes stuff for Skylanders, and he kind of has shown off some of the different ideas that they had, where even one of these was a test tube kind of thing, where it would actually kind of have liquid in it with sparkles. And, that was kind of an idea, but they chose to scrap that because they figured that could break easily. If a kid was throwing it around the room, it could break, the liquid would leak out, and they didn't really want to do that. But also, I think that was kind of a really cool idea to just have, a test tube with, a little DNA strand kind of thing in it that has some, liquid that you could shake around. That's kind of a unique idea, especially for a Skylanders figure. So at the end of the day, what they came up with is very similar to the traps, so much so that, I think even a lot of collectors still accidentally say trap when they mean creation crystal or vice versa, because it's just such a similar way that they chose to present them that, I don't know, it could have been better. It could have been better the way that they chose to lay that out. But at the end of the day, as a collector, it still was fun to go out to all the stores and pay attention to all the Skylanders news going on about the waves and shipments and things to be able to try to track down all those sculpts. So some give and take, but they could have come up with something better.
They definitely could have. Although I would say the creator that they actually have in-game where you design your Skylander, I found that to be an amazing bit of programming there. And the creator app that came out alongside it, which I don't believe is available anymore, unfortunately. But these were amazing programs that you literally could let your imagination run wild and create nearly anything you wanted to, as long as it was bipedal or a mermaid.
Yeah, which that's kind of one of my other complaints about like the actual creator itself. I mean, for the most part, that creator is pretty spectacular. Like if you wanted to, like if you could pretty much think it up, there's a good chance you could make it in the Skylanders creator, which is really nice. But
The limitations that were also there were kind of disappointing in that maybe I wanted a swashbuckler that could walk on two legs. Maybe I wanted a sorcerer class that didn't have to float. And maybe I wanted a ninja that actually had knees.
yeah, so that was one thing that I feel like they also could have just fixed really easily by starting up the creator instead of maybe picking your battle class first, or maybe you pick it after your battle class, allow you to pick a body type where you can, like, you know, have a section specifically where it's like, all right, you've picked a bowslinger. Now, do you want them to not have a torso? Do you want them to have a mermaid tail? Do you want them to be able to, like, float? You know, like, they could have, like, given you different customization options instead of tying those directly to a battle class, because that's the thing. Like, I barely ever use the swashbuckler class specifically because I'm not really a big fan of the mermaid design.
And I didn't use the ninja class more than once because I wanted a full bodied Skylander.
Right. Yeah, and it's kind of weird that, you know, we would have characters like Taekwon Crow who did have a torso and part of the ninja class that we couldn't actually like replicate ourselves with the creator space. It was a little odd that they kind of went that direction. It's cool that they tried to give you that option, but I feel like they could have pulled that out and put it into like the like size part of the creator menu, you know, as you're like shuffling through things, or they could have made it its own separate selection somewhere else. It was just kind of forcing it.
And definitely don't make it a permanent decision like the battle class was.
Oh yeah.
Allow us to switch it up.
Right. I would definitely agree with that. Another thing that I would have really liked to have seen them include with that, which they kind of have indicated that they would have done that if Skylanders 7 did go through. But another thing that I wish they could have done alongside those options is give us the option for, you know, either bipedal or quadruped, so we could have our dragon characters. And also, if they could have given us the option of having mounted characters as well. So, like, characters like Fright Rider. That would have been really cool to be able to have that option. So, you know, maybe they could have done something like movement type. You know, they could have had, like, this section where it's like, all right, do you want them to float? Do you want them to be riding an animal of some sort? Do you want them to walk on 4 legs? Do you want them to walk on 2 legs? If they just had a section like that, that would have been awesome. But, yeah, for some reason they didn't. But otherwise, other than that, this creator really allows you to pretty much do whatever you want. Like, it will allow you to go in and customize every single color on a figure, which is insane. It really is.
It really is.
Yeah, you can spend a long time just going in and tweaking all the colors on a character to make sure that it's exactly right. But if you don't want to do that, they also have color schemes as well that are all kind of named after either characters or holidays or levels from the original Spyro's Adventure game. So I kind of like that they were like, all right, well, if you don't want to come up with a color scheme yourself, then we have these options here for you. But if you do, then you are able to go in and literally customize everything. It's very cool. Now, one thing that they didn't allow you to customize, though, with the color is the color of the weapon. I do wish they had allowed you, in some cases, to be able to tweak the color of the weapon, because sometimes I felt like I would have to pick the weapon first in order to make sure that it would, like, go well with whatever color scheme I was going with. But that's really kind of more so a nitpick, because typically the weapons weren't too all over the place to where you wouldn't be able to make it work with whatever design you wanted to go with. So there is that.
That's very, very true. I loved the vastness of the options you had. I loved being able to just run around Skylands and collect these hundreds of pieces. And it made it a lot more fun for me to go out and create characters because I know that I had gone out and actually earned a lot of these parts in order to do so.
Yeah, I really like the system that they kind of came up with. I think they gave you a pretty decent amount of parts at the beginning of the game to where you could kind of come up with something that you're happy with. But then
Yep.
as you're playing through the game, you could keep going back into it to add in the parts that you found along the way and keep kind of upgrading your character and changing it along the way, which is another thing that I really appreciate with the creator, because pretty much like once you create your character, it's not at all locked to that crystal except for the battle class. But like at any point, you can just hit the button that would typically open the stats for any typical Skylander, and that button will just open you right back up into the creator to be able to customize your Imaginator again. So if you just beat a Doomlander and you're like, oh hey, I really like this part that they just dropped, let me equip it to my Imaginator, you'll do that immediately. And that's really cool that you're able to just jump back in, add a part, and then there you go, your Imaginator's updated. And that's really cool. And I really appreciate that.
It definitely felt really, really rewarding.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. I do wish that Imaginators had a couple more collectibles other than Imaginite, because I do think it got a little repetitive in terms of the fact that, like, pretty much you knew almost whatever you were going to be picking up was going to be going towards the creator in some way or another, towards creating Imaginators. So I wish they had done a little bit more other than the Imaginator parts, but still, it was kind of fun no matter what, like finding, you know, one of the snails and chasing after it, or finding an Imaginite chest hidden somewhere and still being able to, you know, be surprised by whatever was going to be coming out of that chest because it was all randomized. And then even with that, if you got something that you'd already had, they would just boost the stats on it a little bit, which is kind of really cool. So no matter what, even if you've already gotten all the parts available in the game, it's still going to be giving you some kind of boost to your Imaginators, which is cool.
And I definitely really enjoyed that they improved themselves each time you picked up a duplicate. It made me want to go out there and just find the same weapon as many times as I could just to get it to be as strong as I could possibly make it.
Yeah, which does kind of lead to the semi-problem that the Imaginators are like the most broken Skylanders ever.
Yes, there is that. That is one of the biggest downsides to the creation crystals and the Skylanders that you can build with them, is that they are just so broken because they're not limited to level 20, and there is really no cap on how high their stats can go because their equipment just keeps getting stronger when you find more.
Exactly, right. Yeah, you know, if you find duplicated armor, then like that's just going to keep increasing all of their base stats. So already if you're equipping like ultimate gear for like literally everything on your Imaginator,
Which, mind you, unlocks at level 6.
true. So already that's pretty low. But if you keep doing that and then you keep finding duplicates of the stuff that's equipped on your Imaginator, that character is going to get really powerful real quick. And then considering that some of the powers that you're able to equip to your Imaginators are some of the most powerful attacks that pretty much any Skylander has ever, it starts to add up really fast to the point where, you know, Imaginators can just cream enemies easily. So, you know, it'd be terrifying to see how they would play out in the Archean arena.
Which is entirely why they're banned from the Archean arena.
Yeah, they just obliterate any of the typical Skylanders, and that's just because their stats are so much higher than any other Skylanders, including a lot of the senseis. So it's just crazy because the senseis are already powerful as they are, and then the Imaginators are just one-upping them. So there was just this insane kind of, like, I wouldn't exactly call it unbalancing, because they pretty much kept all the balancing for all the rest of the Skylanders from Superchargers moving forward into Imaginators, but there was just this insane power gap where they were just deciding that the Senseis and the Imaginators would become so much more powerful than any other Skylander, so it was an odd choice, and because of that, that kind of makes the game a little bit more broken due to that.
I liked that having senseis increase the level caps of the Imaginators, but I really do think they should have put a max cap on it of level 20. Especially because this has been tradition in Skylanders since Swap Force, that the cap is level 20. And Imaginators are literally the only Skylanders that can increase beyond that. And that is what makes them more broken than the senseis. Because If they were capped off at level 20, yes, they could still outshine the senseis fairly easily if you're willing to go out and collect duplicates of the same weapons over and over again. But not as easily as jumping your Skylander all the way up to 40 and 50 and beyond.
Right.
So I feel as though they should have capped off the Imaginators at level 20, or heck, even level 30, and in that case, allowed all the other Skylanders to progress up to level 30 as well. I think it should have been just a blanket across the board, this is your maximum cap.
Yeah, I can understand that because, I mean, I think they start off increasing the level around 15 in what they actually ended up doing, but really they should have just started it off by giving the Imaginators like a cap at like 5 and then working them up to like 20 or 25 or something. Like 25 is still a nice round number.
Yes.
So,
and then
why not
allow
just cap
all the
it
other
there?
Skylanders to meet them there.
Yeah, especially because with the Imagineers also being able to get the boosted stats from collecting duplicate parts of Imaginite, it's like, well, even then they're still going to be giving literally every other character a run for their money, so, they should be nerfed in some way, and I think nerfing them via the level cap would have been a good idea, and then just making it to where they can level up so far past every other Skylander is just way beyond broken.
It really is, because you had to collect every Skylander that came out with Imaginators to maximize that level cap. I think we should embark on a journey ourselves to collect some more Skylanders. Let's go on a legendary treasure hunt.
It's once again time for another legendary treasure hunt where we try to find the best bargain deals possible on Skylanders. And today's challenge, rather fittingly, we are trying to find the lot with the most reactor sculpt creation crystals for a max price of $60. So, Ditto, why don't you go ahead and talk about your lot and where you found it and what price it's at?
Alright, well, this week, surprisingly, I found my lot on eBay. It is a lot of exactly 2 fire reactor creation crystals for the price of $12, amounting to $6 a piece, which is a pretty good deal on a creation crystal these days, I would say.
Oh yeah, I would say. If you're pretty much able to find a creation crystal for less than for what it was going for new in box, then I'd say that's a pretty good deal because like Imaginators items for some reason are just typically so expensive, and especially the creation crystals. You typically see like one of them going for like, $15 used, out of the packaging. So anything that is under 10 is a great deal. So getting 2 for 6 each, really good, really good.
And Imaginators stuff has jumped up in price, by the way, because Imaginators is just the superior Skylanders game.
Yes, that must exactly be it. Maybe it's that they're having a hard time selling them, so they're just like, whatever, we'll just bump up the price. Maybe sometime a hardcore collector will buy that. Yeah, so, and I chose the challenge for this week, and as per usual, the point scoring is 1 point for every reactor sculpt that's in the lot, half a point for every $5 under the price limit that you are, and minus half a point for every shroom boom in the lot, as well as I get to award a bonus point for the deal that goes above and beyond. And I chose this challenge mostly not just because this is specifically related to creation crystals, which is what this episode's all about, but also because the reactor is like the kind of generic creation crystal sculpt. This is what we got in the starter pack, and I think it's the design that most everyone's familiar with, so I figured that this would kind of make a good challenge. And plus, creation crystals, no matter what, are always a really good thing to have because it just gives you the opportunity to save more of your Skylanders, more of your Imaginators, to crystals and have a couple spares left over to be able to design something else later if you want to. So it's always a good thing to have a couple spare creation crystals lying around somewhere.
Absolutely.
Right. So, Ditto, you have 2 fire reactor creation crystals, so that brings your subtotal up to 2, and you are $48 under the max price of 60, and that will give you an additional 4.5 points. So that will bring your grand total up to 6.5 points.
Awesome.
Yeah, pretty good. 6.5 is pretty good, especially for a lot that just has exactly 2 creation crystals. So very awesome. You found a pretty good deal there.
I did.
Now moving on to mine, I kind of had to pick and choose some stuff because this one person was kind of offering a buy 4 get 1 free deal, so I kind of just made my own lot based out of what they were offering here, which I believe Ditto's had to do on one occasion, because this was a very hard challenge. I really thought these reactor crystals were going to be abundant. But apparently not. Apparently not. You think that they would be since they were in every single starter pack, but nope. So yeah, so this was pretty hard. So mine is a lot of 5 fire reactor crystals for the price of $20, and I found that on eBay. So, pretty decent. I basically just did some picking and choosing out of what this person had to offer to be able to kind of get that buy 4 get 1 free deal on eBay. So, the subtotal is 5 for the 5 different fire reactor crystals, and then I am $40 under the max price of 60, which gives me 4 points, which brings my grand total up to 9. And I think since Ditto and I have pretty similar deals here, where, I'm pretty much getting my creation crystals for 5, granted I'm getting 1 for free, but, Ditto's also getting hers for 6. I think these are really kind of similar deals, and none of these lots are really overly spectacular. This is pretty much fitting exactly what the challenge is asking for. So I don't really think anyone needs the bonus point this week. So it looks like this week I'm going to be the winner by just a couple points, but still both of these are really good deals that definitely, if you're looking for some creation crystals, especially of the fire element, this would definitely be something you want to pick up. So good game, Ditto.
Good game, Inklander. It was a lot of fun.
I really enjoyed it. Although this challenge was very hard.
It really was. But you know what? It keeps us on our toes and just goes to prove even more to our listeners that if you're looking for a deal, you can find it if you look hard enough.
Oh yeah, very true. Alright, and with that, with our creation crystals in hand, I'm kind of starting to get a little hungry. So, looks like Flynn's kind of getting a little hungry over there too. So let's go ahead and board the Dread Yacht and fly off to our next destination where hopefully we'll be able to find some lunch.
Normally, when we're aboard the Dread Yacht on our way to our next tour, it would be Flynn who is piloting, but I guess he and Inklander are just kind of too hungry to stand at this point, so I'm piloting the Dread Yacht today, and we're going to go get us something to eat. So we're heading off to Captain Cluck's Chicken HQ.
Captain Cluck's also happens to be the sponsor for today's episode, so let's take a listen to hear what they have to say.
Who's got the grub when the grub needs getting? Faster feast when time is ticking. Same old scheme, but it's still sticking. Cap'n Cluck's king-size chicken. Cap'n Cluck's king-size chicken. What was that, a turkey?
Yes, so Captain Cluck's Chicken HQ. Oh my, what a level.
Oh yes, what a level.
This quite possibly might be one of my favorite levels in Superchargers.
I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I really like the theming of this level. I think it fits it really well. It kind of has this like barnyard kind of feel to it, but it also has a lot of allusions to factory farming, which I think are kind of funny. Like the whole sea vehicle area where you're having to like get the like chicken feed into the water, and the water's all like brown and murky, and then it turns it purple. It's just like, okay. It's like very on the nose there. And it really kind of like uses that to like kind of play it up, and I kind of appreciate that as someone that's vegetarian who kind of started for health reasons but does kind of have some concerns about factory farming practices. At least making sure that people are aware of it, at least aware that it's going on. Not that I have a problem with people eating meat, but it's just like so long as you know what's going on and what's going into your food, that I think is the most important thing. So having all this kind of like on the nose kind of stuff, at least in the sea vehicle area about that. And then even the fact that you're able to like shrink and grow the chickens, the fact that like the chickens are barely able to walk. I think it's honestly kind of very like nice, subtle, like social commentary without kind of going too far with it, without going like PETA level, basically. I kind of just enjoy the fact that they kind of throw this like social commentary into it. I kind of appreciate that. But and then even going off of that, the actual theming of the level I think is really good. I think it's really well done. As I said, it kind of has this barnyard aesthetic to it. And overall, it's kind of fun. It's fun to play. There's a lot of good mechanics with the shrinking and growing where you're able to solve some puzzles with it. You're able to fight some enemies with it. It's kind of really cool. The only parts that I really don't like about this level are the vehicle sections where you're trying to like get the chickens into like the vacuum suction thing. I don't know. I don't really like that. I think they kind of made the controls for that a little too loose. I think they could have made those a little bit better. I think that's just kind of a situation of, yet again, Vicarious Visions trying to make things hard for the sake of being hard. And that's kind of really the only thing that I don't like about this level. Even the like parts in the sea section and even in some of the land racing sections where you are just flat out on a straight path, those sections that I usually really don't like, I actually kind of like them in this one. I think they're kind of fun, and they're also really themed very well. Typically all these like straight path areas kind of feel a little bit boring and a little bit mundane, like they're just kind of generically themed around the level. But here I think they actually have some really fun mechanics. And the sea vehicle section itself, I really like how they gave the sea vehicle section some puzzle elements to it in this one, because typically the sky and sea areas kind of feel a bit neglected in some of the levels, but this one actually feels like it's really fleshed out and really a lot of fun. And it kind of makes me wish that we could have seen a little bit more of this kind of stuff that we see in Captain Cluck's Chicken HQ for those sea levels in other levels in the game. So overall, I actually really enjoy this. Even like the actual like vehicle-based stuff and even the on-foot stuff. I actually really enjoy the gameplay of this and the theming of this level a whole lot.
I would agree with actually pretty much all of that. This level is absolutely amazing. It's a lot of fun to play as. The puzzles where you're shrinking and growing the feed bags in order to move the things around in the chicken coops and open doors and such. That was really, really unique, and I thought it was actually pretty clever and really enjoyed it. As for the vehicle sections, I would agree with you on all of this as well. The vehicle sections were great except for kind of putting the chickens into the vacuums, because that was very, very loose and very hard to control precision-wise. As a speedrunner, that is the bit that slows down this level the most, is you have to have that precision, and it's just not there.
Yeah.
This is one of the few stages where the boss fight being in a vehicle really didn't even seem out of place, because the last time we fought Cluck, he was sort of in a robotic suit anyway. So the only way this could have played out differently was to go back to essentially the previous boss fight against Cluck, or to go up against him in a vehicle. I think it would have been a little better done if we were using sky vehicles for that boss fight. But other than that, it doesn't seem all that out there for us to be having a vehicle boss fight in this case.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think actually the sky vehicle section is probably the weakest of the vehicle sections in this level, because I think you go fight the like giant rooster, and that's kind of boring to me. Like that one's not really too exciting, even though it does have like that mini boss fight. I think that would have worked a whole lot better if that was the final boss fight against Cluck. Because then they could have done a lot more stuff with it, especially if they had allowed the fact of having a sky vehicle area as like the required boss fight. or at least optional to be able to do that boss fight with, I think they could have come up with some really fun and interesting mechanics. But yeah, as you said, like, we got the Cluck boss fight back in Swap Force in Tower of Time, and that was pretty fun, and I really like that level. I think maybe that one's a little bit on the lengthy side, but that's Swap Force generally. But I really think that the best way to kind of bring Cluck forward and kind of bring his personality back is to kind of have that vehicle section fight. And I actually think that it kind of works really well with the kind of theming of the actual level itself, and also with just Cluck's kind of inventor kind of personality and kind of hobbyist kind of background that he has. And I actually really like it. I think it fits with him really well. And this is actually, I think, a time when vehicles get used fairly decently okay. Except for the vacuum chicken. That's awful. But
it really is.
Yeah, but the rest of it, really good. Really good. And
I would say this is easily one of the best stages in Superchargers.
I would agree. I think this is up there.
It's definitely one of the most cohesive. Like, everything is consistent and flows really well, and there's really nothing to complain about other than the vacuum chickens.
Yeah, really.
And I mean, honestly, chicken torpedoes kind of made me chuckle. So
yeah, it's great. It's really actually a fun, cohesive level, and like everything just fits well. Like, it really feels like the theming of this was very cohesive across the board. It's not like some levels like Willikin Workshop where it still feels cohesive and yet it has those like different sections that we've talked about before, like how it had like the Willikin Village and then the factory and then like the lead up to Crankcase. Like, that all still felt very cohesive, but it's cohesive in a different way. In Captain Cluck's Chicken HQ, it is literally just, it flows together seamlessly, where it doesn't feel like you've ever left this kind of like barnyard kind of environment throughout the whole thing, and yet they still find ways to switch it up, like the chicken torpedoes and like the chicken feed sea vehicle section and all these puzzles with the feed bags and having to shrink and grow things. Like, they actually managed to find a way to change up this theme and change up this mechanic so much in one level to where it feels like you're progressing through the level, and yet they still managed to make it feel so cohesive at the same time. And I really appreciate that.
I can agree 100%.
Yeah. And one other thing that I think we kind of have to touch on with this level is the fact that they composed a jingle for it.
Yes, absolutely. That needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, which the person that composed it, Matt Parag, this was not composed by Balf. It was Matt Parag, and he is the same person that did the theme for Mesmeralda, Pull Your Strings, and he also does Supercharged with Love later in the game for the fake ending credits. And it's great. Like, it's just like this little like 15-second jingle that feels very kind of nostalgic to fast food kind of jingles that used to happen back in the day. We don't really hear them much now. You still kind of get like "I'm loving it" from McDonald's, but that's really like it. But the fact that they went out of their way to have these like speaker systems throughout like the area, like just kind of playing this jingle as you go through, I really appreciate it. And then not only that, but they also gave Cluck that catchphrase, "Remember, if it's not king size, it's just chicken." And it's just, I really like it. I really like the cohesiveness of that too. It just makes you feel like you're there even more, and I like that.
Those were just the icing on the cake.
Oh yeah.
They really were for this stage.
Oh yeah, I love it. Like, they really just knock this one out of the park to me. I'm typically not a big fan of what Superchargers does with the vehicle sections and does with some of the gameplay mechanics, but here they really got it. They still did a really good job of making it feel like a traditional Skylanders experience while integrating all these new mechanics and integrating the vehicle sections. And like, honestly, like, this is probably one of the best Superchargers levels.
All right, and now that we've had some lunch and we found Inklander some potato wedges to eat, let's head on over to the Archean Arena. Maybe grab a snack there as well and watch a couple Skylanders go toe to toe.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Archean Arena, where we pit Skylander against Skylander in a bout of hypothetical combat. This week's challenge is just going to be me and Ditto. And Ditto, why don't you go ahead and start off describing who you've brought to the Archean Arena this week?
All right. Sure. Let's do this. You ready to lose?
I guess so. Now I'm concerned.
All right. I have brought with me today the Skylander Bumble Blast.
Oh. Yeah, I might be losing. Okay.
Bumble Blast is a ranged life Skylander with a maximum health at level 20 of 960, critical hit 58, armor of 33, speed of 32, and luck of 28. His attack 1 is called Bazooka, which fires homing honeybees at his opponent, dealing a repeated 20 damage, with a 39-point damage finisher. His attack 2 is Honey Glob, which shoots a big ball of honey that coats enemies in honey when hit, dealing 15 points of damage. His attack 3 is Hive Mine, which fires a beehive into the ground that explodes into honey when an enemy approaches it, dealing 62 points of damage. For upgrade paths, Bumble Blast's top path is known as Beekeeper, which improves attack 1, adding a charge, firing more bees with increased damage, and a second charge attack that fires a queen bee, which knocks enemies into the air. The bottom path is called Honey Tree, which gives attack 2 a charge, adds bees to the honey globs, increases the attack damage of attack 2, and increases Bumble Blast's armor. It's also noteworthy that Bumble Blast has a soul gem called Bee Pack Backpack, which grants Bumble Blast a beehive backpack that automatically launches bees at nearby foes.
Yeah, so he's pretty powerful. Like, he definitely packs a punch. And he's really fun to play as. He has a really good character design, too, in my opinion. And a lot of his attacks are pretty good at dealing damage, especially that tertiary attack there. And his bazooka, because even though it's only dealing 20 damage, you're able to fire it repeatedly. The Honey Glob doesn't really do that much unless it does get upgraded, but Hive Mine is pretty useful, except, of course, you would need to kind of, in a PvP situation, try to somehow get your opponent to get into the Hive Mine to be able to have that go off. But really, like, the Bazooka, even though it is only dealing 20 damage, that could definitely be pretty effective because you're able to just keep firing that off, and that could be concerning pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Plus, Bumble Blast, for a core Skylander from Swap Force, has a pretty high critical hit at 58, which is a little concerning.
Bumble Blast is definitely a very fun character to play as. Yes. I tend to honestly myself prefer the Jolly one, but that's just because I like the Christmas variants a little bit better. So I do tend to prefer that one, but Bumble Blast himself is just really fun.
Sadly, never got a Series 2, but at least we got him in Swap Force in 3 different ways via the Light Core, the Holiday variant, and his regular form. So at least there's that. Because he is such a fun character, I really kind of wouldn't have minded him kind of replacing Stealth Elf, honestly, as like the life element representative, I guess, because he is just kind of really fun. And actually, it would have kind of been fun to see what would have happened if he had gotten a supercharge for him as opposed to Stealth Elf. That kind of would have been interesting, actually.
Yeah, it would have.
Man, picturing like Bumble Blast with like a sky vehicle, that actually kind of might have been really fun.
Oh yeah.
Some of the stuff they
Actually.
could have done with like beehive stuff and bees and everything with that. Oh,
Oh yes.
that would have been so cool. Man, I'm really regretting that they didn't do that. But all right, so there you go. Bumble Blast would have been great to see him get something else beyond Swap Force, but hey, at least we got him 3 times in Swap Force.
Yeah.
So, my character comes from Skylanders' Trap Team, and I figured since we were just talking about food, I might as well go ahead and pick Food Fight,
Nice.
who is another fairly well-known character, mostly just because he was included in the starter pack for Trap Team. And, he also had a variant as well, the Dark variant. So, yeah, Food Fight is a life element ranged character with a maximum health of 780. He has a critical hit of 54, armor 29, speed of 55, which is surprisingly high, and luck of 24. His attack 1 is the Tomato Launcher, which, as you would expect, launches tomatoes at opponents, and that deals 28 damage. His attack 2 is Blooms of Doom, which is basically planting traps which will explode if enemies come by, very similar to Bumble Blast's tertiary attack, and that deals 35 damage. And then Food Fight's tertiary attack is Zucchini Blast, which delivers a pretty heavy burst of damage over a wide area. So, and that deals 32 damage. So his top path is Tomatoologist, where he is able to plant tomatoes, which have increased area and damage. His attack 3 detonates the Blooms of Doom, and enemies damaged by exploding plants take damage over time. Meanwhile, his bottom path is Bloomer and Boomer, which has attack 3 gain charge and slows enemies, and blooms detonate each other. So very different kind of playstyles, in which one's a little bit more kind of defensive, I guess, and the top path is a little bit more of the offensive kind of side of things, where you're really kind of trying to use all of your attacks kind of a little bit more in a combo way with your top path. So overall, Food Fight's a pretty fun character. He's not a character that I tend to play as very often. I think he's pretty decent as a core, but I don't think he's necessarily, anyone's big favorite, like he's not really talked about too much. But still he's kind of a good character.
Absolutely, he's a good character. He was actually one of my go-tos my first few playthroughs of Trap Team.
Oh, cool.
He's really, really fun. He's really strong. And he gets the job done.
Yeah.
I would also point out, he plays very similarly to Bumble Blast.
That is true. His tomato launcher is a little bit slower than Bumble Blast's primary attack, though.
And it doesn't home.
Right, and his Blooms of Doom also deals like half the damage that Bumble Blast does. So, and on top of that, Food Fight also has a couple 100 points lower of health compared to Bumble Blast. So he's kind of just looking like a weaker version of Bumble Blast here, which is not really good.
True. Weaker but faster. He does have speed on Bumble Blast.
That is true. So he is able to run away at a base speed a little bit better of Bumble Blast. None of their attacks are speed based. So really we are looking at that base speed stat of how exactly they're going to be kind of running away from each other or, towards each other.
I feel like head to head, Bumble Blast takes this easily.
Yeah.
And I say that because his attack 1 is faster. Yes, it does deal a little bit less damage, but it is a faster attack. And he has those automatic bees that also kind of just pop out and go for it.
Yeah.
So that's additional damage that's not even accounted for in the attack 1. But it still counts. It still tends to pile up faster than one would expect. So head to head, Bumble Blast would take it.
Yeah, I think pretty much every single time Bumble Blast is going to be taking this. Because even with looking at, Honey Glob, which barely does any damage, that still has a pretty good range on it. Zucchini Blast also has a really good range on it, but that's also just not really that much damage.
But the Honey Glob also increases the damage that the bees do.
Yeah, that is true. Meanwhile, Food Fight does not have anything like that. So the thing is Food Fight, while he plays kind of similarly to Bumble Blast in terms of having that launcher, having those kind of plant mines that are able to be placed down, basically Food Fight's just overall just kind of a weaker version of what Bumble Blast is.
I do feel like Food Fight could take it like 1 out of 10 times. Honestly, it all comes down to how well Food Fight uses his traps.
Yeah.
If he were to use his traps effectively, even if it were to come down to a match of traps, Hive Mind versus Boom Blossoms, stat-wise, Bumble Blast takes it, but it comes down to movement.
That's
Who's
true.
walking through the traps? Because
true.
while they may not deal that much damage, at least in the case of the Boom Blooms, just like with the automatic B that Bumble Blast gets from his Soul Gem, that damage does add up quickly. So I feel like it wouldn't necessarily be Bumble Blast every time. I feel like 1 out of 10 goes to Food Fight on this one.
Yeah, like I can see that. Like I think Food Fight's primary, like I wouldn't say advantage, but the one thing that's going to help him is that speed stat.
Yes.
So the thing is I think he might be able to, shoot off a couple tomato launcher things, maybe be able to get some hits in, be able to place some traps, and then kind of run away and hope something good happens.
Pretty much.
So I think maybe that could get him 1 out of 10, but yeah, this is almost entirely going to go to Bumble Blast.
I think what ends up giving him the 1 out of 10 is any player who's sitting in 10 matches in a row like this, by match 10, Bumble Blast's player is going to be cocky. And gonna end up getting sloppy at that point because they've already won 9.
True.
So I feel like that's what tips it for that 1 out of 10.
Yeah, I also think that would factor into it as well. Someone that knows that they have basically super Food Fight, basically, is gonna be going into this thinking like, oh yeah, like this is gonna be a piece of cake. So that could also have them drop their guard a little bit. So definitely.
Exactly. And then that whole get a couple hits in, drop some traps, run, and pray something good happens. That's a lot more likely to happen after 9 losses in a row because whoever's playing as Bumble Blast at that point usually doesn't think, oh, this is going to go against me. Granted, they could think that way, but typically not so.
Yeah.
So I would say I would give it 9 out of 10 to Bumble Blast personally, but I could also very easily see it going 10 out of 10 to Bumble Blast.
Yeah, I think no matter what here, whether it's 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, I think it's pretty safe to declare that Bumble Blast is the winner of this week's Archaean Arena.
Oh, absolutely. Good game, though.
Yes, absolutely. Good game. This was definitely quite interesting to just kind of sit here and realize, oh yeah, Food Fight's basically just bad Bumble Blast.
I can agree with that 100%. I did not see that coming. You said Food Fight, and I'm thinking, oh, this 2 characters that they play very similarly, this could be a really, really close match. And then you started reading off his stats, and my mind went, well then.
Yep. So, sorry, Food Fight.
That brings us to the end of today's episode. You'll find our website and our individual channels listed in the description. Follow our Twitter at SLPortalcasters for regular updates about the podcast, and join our Discord server for Skylanders discussions. Thank you for listening, and in the next episode, we will be discussing the vehicles of Skylanders Superchargers. See you then.
Bye. Well, it looks like I'm going to continue to starve because I'm a vegetarian. This sucks.